Man, I spent 40 hours building and refining this base, and there's a couple of lessons I've learned that will help you save time. Strap into your seat because we're about to land. So, assuming you choose the Olympus map for your first adventure, the best biome to build in is of course forest biome for the abundance of animals, resources, and lack of temperature challenges. There is no single best place to build on, as you can survive anywhere, but it helps to have as many resources as possible in your vicinity because this game is a pain when it comes to traveling. Thankfully, if we check the map of Olympus, we can see that most of both forest biomes is filled with deep mining deposits and caves. When it comes to just base building, leveling up, and advancing up the tech tree, you can spend most of the game in the same spot without traveling too far if all you want to do is build a magnificent base, which for me was a pretty meditative experience. Anyhow, since we'll have access to ores and exotics from any place in the forest biome, there is just two things to consider about picking the location. One is that it's useful to have another biome close to your base in case you need sand, ice, palm seeds, or other resources that don't exist in the forest biome. The second thing worth considering is if there's water nearby. First of all, building on water is great, as then hostile animals will have a hard time reaching you, and secondly, there are buildings that require water wheels, pumps, and so on, and it's useful to have water close by. I personally have chosen this place as it wasn't far from the starting point, and building on water resulted me not having to deal with wildlife almost at all. They did very rarely wander onto my bridges before I installed a creature deterrent, but the surface area that they can access is so much smaller than if you build on the ground that it's a non-issue, and very often they just leave the same way they came in. It has all the mining deposits that I need for every ore available in the game, except that for silica and copper I have to travel a bit farther. Still, not a big issue to just come empty-handed with a mount and get a year's worth of materials at once. It's also worth noting that as far as I know, the ores in deep mining deposits are randomized for each playthrough, so if you build in the same place you might have a different set of deposits here. Now, once you've decided on base location, you need to decide on the materials you'll be building from. If you want to see how houses made from different materials look, there is a cool guide and a whole playlist made by a guy called McGrogan that made the comparison, check it out here. Otherwise, I'll just talk about functional differences. On Olympus you have access to thatch, ice, wood, interior wood, reinforced wood, glass, reinforced glass, stone, stone brick, and concrete. On Prometheus, the DLC map, there's also scoria, scoria brick, and clay brick. They're, for the most part, the equivalent of stone. And then there's limestone on Elysium, which is the equivalent of concrete. These DLC exclusive materials you can also purchase in the workshop, but it costs an arm and a leg to build something out of them. All of the building pieces can be damaged by animals, but glass walls are especially delicate if you build them on the ground, as they're transparent and animals can see through them and attack you. On top of that, thatch and all wood pieces can burn down from lightning strikes or nearby fires. Glass walls, regardless if reinforced or not, take all the damage from falling trees when it's windy, and everything else, unless it's stone, concrete, limestone, or brick, takes 50% of the falling tree damage. Trees aren't an issue if you clear the area before you build your base, but you really don't want to build anything for the long term out of these materials. Aside from what I mentioned, there's also storms that can wreak havoc on your base. There's this outdated infographic I found in an update article that the devs posted back in 2023 that shows how different buildings are affected by storms. Since then, beeswax wood, stone bricks, scoria and scoria brick, clay, ice, limestone, and reinforced glass have been added to the game, so I have updated the infographic and it should be like this. Basically, in terms of storm resistance, anything that isn't thatch, untreated wood, and basic glass will be good enough for your long-term base. The thing is, if you're playing on normal difficulty, you are unlikely to see tier 6 and tier 7 storms. They're a bit more common on harder difficulties and in some missions. Either way, structures don't break as soon as they see a storm cloud. They lose durability gradually, and so you have time to repair them, and even if they do completely lose durability, they never crumble completely. Thankfully, you don't spend any resources on repairs, but you lose hammer durability, so make sure to always have some resource to repair your hammer. Different hammers only affect the speed of use, so I personally use wood hammer for most of my game, as wood is pretty abundant and I always have plenty. In my experience, if the durability of your buildings goes to zero, they don't break. The carcasses of the structures remain standing and you can repair them anytime. It's just the benches and other stuff you have on the interior that can break and disappear completely if the winds get through the holes in your walls and your roofs. As a general rule, anything that can withstand a tier 5 storm is good enough to serve as exterior wall. For example, I built this bridge from reinforced glass and aluminum as the first thing when I came here about 40 hours ago, and they're still crisp and undamaged. Even when I was hit with a tier 6 storm, you see, my aluminum received no damage at all, and my reinforced glass panels took 50 to 60 damage each. It would take 40 to 50 such storms to break one, and it was the first tier 6 storm I encountered after playing for nearly 3 days. Also, regardless of building material, beams, doors, windows, and railings don't take damage from storms at all, in my experience. Only the frames holding the windows and doors do, which is why, as you can see, this wooden door is still standing, as it's inside a stone frame, which resists pretty heavy storms. And here's the beams I built before tier 6 storm hit. You see both beams totally fine standing out in the open, and the only thing that took some damage was the upper wooden floor. What this also tells us is that this upper floor protects the lower floor from the storms. Therefore, you can afford to put interior wood flooring or even thatch flooring in the interior of your base and it will never break, as long as the outer shell of your home is made of stronger materials. Another thing worthy of note, if you're attempting to build in the Arctic biome, flat roofs, even if made from stone, will eventually break from accumulation of snow, which isn't the case with sloped roofs. Same with sand and ash, so be careful with flat roofs when building outside the forest biome. Also, each building piece has different insulation properties. Not something to concern yourself with in the forest biome, but when building in the Arctic or desert, you should check the properties of the building materials before committing to them. And since you can't see the insulation properties of anything before you research it in the tech tree, here's everything you need to know. Do remember that the temperature in your shelter is affected by a combination of insulation values of your building pieces. Having wooden floors in an otherwise concrete shelter will make your shelter have less insulation than if it had concrete floors. To warm up, use heaters, fireplaces, campfires, and hot beverages. To cool, drink water, use water balloons, and AC. Okay, we've talked about durability and how storms won't blow your houses away, but there's another mechanic that can completely break your structures, and that's stability, or structural integrity. This is completely different from durability. Unstable structures still have full HP, and structures with low durability do not lower stability. So everything that you build has a stability rating, and you can see it when hovering over a piece with another building piece. Blue is most stable, that's the one directly attached to the ground or rock. Green is everything else that has perfect stability, and then it gets progressively redder. At bright red it breaks down as soon as you place it, but you have a few seconds to press Y to retrieve it before you lose it forever. You can build stairs onto cliffs as they will count as being attached to the rock, so will always have blue stability icon and won't break. This is how I completed the Riverlands expedition where you have to cross a mountain. So as you can see here, I can insert this wood floor into the rock and it will be blue. Then I can build exactly 4 pieces, and building the 5th will have it immediately break. Same with wood beams, exactly 4 before it breaks. What about stacking them vertically? That's 8 beams and the 9th breaks. What if you build foundations? Does that increase the height? First of all, you can see that you can't stack dirt foundations, and secondly, look, the 8th beam is already breaking. So no, these foundations don't increase the height that you can build on. However, later in the game you get access to concrete and limestone frames that can be stacked. These will always have blue stability and everything connected to them will be green, regardless of height. But in terms of horizontal expansion, it seems that no matter which support you use, the game will never allow you to extend horizontally by more than 4 tiles. As you can see, just like we had with wood when we tried to expand horizontally, the 5th piece breaks. But in terms of vertical support, the game does calculate it differently. The material you build from determines how tall you can build. If you try to build wooden floors on wooden beams, you'd be able to place 7 floor pieces and the 8th would start breaking. So we can have 8 beams but only 7 floors. What if we put some heavier pieces like stone? Then the maximum amount of floors is just 4. Then with stone, scoria and clay you can have 11 beams, then wood floors and 9 stone floors. With concrete and limestone beams you get 16 beams, 15 wood floors and 14 concrete floors. But you'd have to, of course, have more beams to support heavier structures. There is this mission in the game where they send you to desert and tell you to build a tower 9 stories high and place a beacon at the top. This is more floors than wooden beams can support, and building the whole production chain to get stone beams is not a great use of time. So what do? Well, what I did is I just put my beacon on the beam itself. But what about stone beams? Would replacing just the bottom pillar with a stone beam trick the game into thinking you have all the necessary support? Well, I tested this. Here I built these 3 test towers. The left one is made of wooden beams, the middle one has one stone beam at the bottom, and the right one is all stone. So, as you can see, there is no tricking the game, and if you want to build taller, you have to spend the resources. But at least you don't have to worry about beams breaking from storms, unlike walls, which can. So, what about walls? Can they act as beams? No, they are not load-bearing structures in the game. So they too can support more floors, it's just that those floors will inherit the structural integrity of the walls. See, it goes from green on the wall, then yellow and so on. And the next floor already starts from yellow, and then if I try to match the floor below, it immediately breaks. So it's like a Christmas tree, pretty useless this way, and you still have to put down beams or foundations to be able to match the amount of floors. That's why you see builds with beams going all the way to the top. Compared to wood beams that are holding 3 floors at this height, you can see how having just walls is not enough to hold even 2. The problem with this game's building system is that it expects you to build from the ground up, not top to bottom, and whenever you place the first foundation or beam, it assigns the height for you that you cannot change and can only move vertically in terms of a whole beam's height. Let me show what I mean. I had stairs here, but unfortunately the game doesn't have half stairs, only this weird abomination. By the way, if you can't find stairs, they're called ramps in the building menu, and you click R to switch to stairs when you're holding piece of ramp. So my stairs were going far down into the water, and if I wanted to build a walkway from them, then my floors would be underwater, as there is no way to build them at half height. There's no wetness in the game, so it's totally fine to walk on water, but I just didn't like it aesthetically. So what I had to do was build a new, separate grid that would be at the height I wanted. But now when I try to place a new beam, it snaps to the previous structure and tries to build at the same height difference. What you do then is click delete, and it will let you have the freedom again. But then there's 3 problems. Problem number 1 is that you can't adjust the height of the beams, so when placing them, the landscape dictates how deep those beams are going to go. So you can't immediately tell if it's going to match the height you had in mind, and so you have to have a long struggle of trial and error. The second problem is that the direction of your floors depends on where your mouse is pointed at the time of placement. So I put 3 beams here, like this, and like this, and you can see that they now all go in different directions. So you have to place one beam at the correct height and at the correct angle, then snap to that piece and build many more beams for floors further along. But while you can't really adjust the height of your beams, you can make sure the angle is correct. So when building, look at the compass at the top and try to match it with what's on your mind. For example, I stand here and I want to build a walkway that goes straight like this. So remember the cardinal position, which is west in this instance, and when building the beam, turn myself in such a way as to have compass in the same position, and this allows me to build it correctly without any guesswork. And the problem number 3 is that since I pressed delete to not snap into the old grid, this is counted by the game as a whole new structure with its own support. So even if you manage to align floors and walls vertically, see I wasn't able to align them over here, these would not share the supports. So even if visually they are at the same place, they can have different stability. When building my circular tower here, I often had the problem of this wall, for example, being red and this one being green. There was a beam in between them, but it belonged to just one of the walls, and I had to craft a second one and then move my mouse in such a way as to build the second one over the first, just so the other wall can also feel supported. It was exhausting to say the least. And because of the whole grid system and heights and width being set at the moment of placing the first structure, the game does not allow you to be flexible with your designs. The devs recently added diagonal and curved pieces, but they also work inside of this grid. The curved piece, as you can see, only changes which corner it snaps to. So instead of going like this, like a wall goes, they made this piece go like this. The result is that you can't adjust the radius of a curved piece and are forced to either build like this or like this, and cannot natively make something like this, as far as I could tell. So how do you build what I built here? There's two ways. The manual way shared by Ghost and a mod by Peter Lan. I'm not going to go through them, so check out the videos in the description if you're interested in replicating this. And if you're looking for a more advanced building tutorial that will help you create something even crazier like this, check out their other videos too. It takes a lot of resources to build a big base, and that's where the bulk of your time goes to. To speed it up, find deep ore deposits and put down deep mining drills. I was lucky to have a stone deposit right at my base, so I never had to mine my own stone and carry it from afar. If you can't find any deposits or you haven't reached the level for unlocking the tech yet, check out my tips and tricks video for a trick that will let you carry thousands of ores unencumbered. But if you don't want to exploit game mechanics, there are these talents available for your character that can help you out. These lower the crafting costs of buildings and carry weight of buildables and materials, mine and log more efficiently, and also decrease weight. And if you're playing solo, make sure to invest into these skills that further increase mining and logging yields and decrease weight. I also advise you to complete the spelunking mission, as it will give you the backpack that reduces the weight of ores and wood by 45%. If you get tired of the grind and just want to build, there are quite a few mods that can help you with that. Nexus Mods has over 100 mods that rebalance the game, for example reduce the cost of crafting. And there is also Project Daedalus, which alters the game in more drastic ways, like with the jetpack over here, and more sophisticated curved stairs and buildings. Just download them, put them in this folder, build what you want, and then just delete them from the game folder to continue playing the way the devs intended. Do note that installing these mods can make the game uninteresting or even break your save, so back up the save and install them at your own risk. Some additional tips for you to make sure your base stands for a long time. Build a few lightning rods so your base doesn't burn down. When upgrading things, you don't have to deconstruct them, just equip hammer, aim at the piece you want to replace, click R, choose what you want, and then click right mouse button to replace. You do need to have the selected piece in your inventory. And don't bother with the building skills, or if you do, make them temporary. I definitely wouldn't waste skill points on extra space, as each bench has more space than most storages do. I played the whole game with just 2 cupboards because of this. And what is coziness? Coziness is the parameter that affects the quality of your sleep. It's calculated from cozy items and pets in 20 meters radius from your bed, including vertically. You can check the coziness by hovering over your bed. Reportedly, the maximum amount is 700. If it's below, consider adding cats, dogs, rugs, and other decor items. It's definitely worth it to increase it. I have found that not having the well-rested buff makes my character a million times weaker. To connect electricity to an existing building, point at the line, not the connector itself. And when moving things between bases, either pack everything into a buffalo's cart or use a dropship beacon to help you transfer your things. If you aren't familiar with the method, I explain everything about it in my exotics guide here, including the uses for each workshop item and every possible way of farming exotics, unstable exotics, legendary biomass, and uranium rods. Check it out and see you there.